Good evening and welcome to the meeting of the Governance and Audit Scrutiny Committee. My name is Councillor Justin Wrench and I'll be chairing this meeting. Members, before we begin, can I please remind you that this meeting is being broadcast via the Council's YouTube channel, so can I please remind everyone present to turn off their microphones when they have finished speaking. I shall now proceed with the business of the meeting. Agenda item 1, apologies for absence. Apologies for the meeting have been received from Councillor Mrs Cunningham, Councillor Raymond and Councillor Walsh. I don't believe we have any other apologies, do we?
No, Chairman, they are all the apologies we've received in the Governance Service. Thank you.
So agenda item 2, declarations of interest. So do any members have any disclosable pecuniary interest, other pecuniary interest or non-pecuniary interest that they wish to declare this evening? No. So I will, as there are no declarations, I'll proceed to agenda item 3, minutes of the previous meeting. So please can I have a proposer to approve the minutes as an accurate record of the meeting of the Governance and Audit Scrutiny Committee, on the 12th of January 2023. Thank you, Councillor Houston. And can I now seek a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Walters. So the minutes have been moved and seconded as an accurate record. All those in favour? There's many of you out there, so please indicate by a show of hands. Thank you. So the minutes are approved. Thank you. So, agenda item 4, public question time. I can confirm that there are no registered speakers for this evening's meeting, so I will now proceed to agenda item 5, which is to receive a suite of the Council's key financial indicators as of the 28th of February 2023. This report is set out on pages 5 to 10 of tonight's agenda, and I would like to invite Phil Myers, our Head of Finance, to set out his report.
Okay, thanks, Chair, and good evening, members. So, members will be familiar with this report. So it's a usual item, reporting on a set of key financial indicators. So, the first part deals with the sort of budget position, and you can see that at the end of February, overall, we were actually 249,000 below what we were expecting at that time, so a favourable variance. And that's made up of a number of factors. So with staffing or salary budgets, you can actually see we're actually spending more than we were expecting at the end of February, 298,000. That is after taking into account 275,000 of the £300,000 efficiency factor that we have built into the budget. So that's almost like a planned underspend that we would expect to be achieving. On top of that, we also had the pay award, which I know we've reported previously. That was a higher pay award cost to the authority than we'd originally allowed. So actually 298,000 over at that stage, including the pay award, is actually quite good news, because that extra pay award was quite significant. In terms of our commercial rent income, we still do show a bit of a shortfall here against what we would expect. In terms of occupation levels, you can see we're still remaining at around the 90% level, and that was at the end of February. I think since that time we have seen some improvement with some of our lets, and there's been some changes in the process and simplification of the letting process at particularly the Braintree Enterprise Centre. So I think that's had a positive effect, which we will see that sort of coming through in future reports. In terms of other income, you can see Against profile, we were actually significantly overachieved in terms of our income, almost £1.5 million. And listed in the report there are the main areas that are contributing to that. Treasury management, treasury management and waste management, recycling material income being probably the most significant aspects of that. Both market-led income streams. There are some areas where we're still got some pressures, so around car parking. So we've still got some shortfall since the COVID period, and across that sort of planning applications, income is also down there. In terms of our expenditure, we were actually spending more than we were anticipating, and a lot of that is sort of the higher fuel, energy and inflationary costs that are impacting across all our services, but particularly our operational and our commercial property. In terms of the capital, we've got a revised profiled spend, so this is the expected spend of 9.5 million. And against that, at the end of February, we'd actually spent 7.6 million. And again, the report sort of lists out some of the major projects, which I'm sure would have no surprise to members. Capital receipts is positive, so against an expected 5.7 million, we'd actually achieved 6.1 million. The higher amount generally being from preserved right to buys, which comes through to us from arrangements with Eastlight, and also from an arrangement, a VAT shelter that was also part of the original stock transfer. There are timing differences with regard to some of the other receipts we were expecting, but the sort of net impact of that is neutral. So at the moment, we're now sort of preparing the budget outturn, and that will sort of feed through in the coming weeks, and that will get reported through to Cabinet at the next Cabinet. In terms of our collection of local tax and business rate, that's looking positive. Council tax just slightly above where we were at this time last year. Business rates is the other way. We're just slightly short of where we'd got our collection rate at the same time at this period. But we have, again, in both of those areas, we've actually seen some improvement on those as we've gone through to the end of the year. So the end of year figures are looking very favourable against what we achieved last year. In terms of the write-offs, obviously we end up having to write off debt as a last resort, and as we've referenced in the past, a large part of that is around these individual voluntary arrangements. So it does mean we write debt off initially, but we do have arrangements then in place to collect that, and if those arrangements do come to an end, then we can then restate that debt and then instigate recovery action that's appropriate. So not too much more to say about that aspect of the report. Supplier payments is good, so we're 97.9, nearly 98% against a target of 97. So we're seeing now that system improvements we made a couple of years ago, that's now starting to get embedded, and that performance is now sort of picking up. So that's good. In terms of our investments, this is where we've seen the benefits, I suppose, of the interest rate growth. So just over £800,000 of interest secured at the end of February, which is actually a return of almost 2%. And putting that in context, the return we were achieving at this time last year was actually 0.05%. So whilst 2% still doesn't sound a lot, obviously, compared with last year, and that return is on the uplift as the interest rates have been rising, so that we're going to see that continuation through. In terms of our pooled funds, so dividend income, again, 719,000 at the end of February, which again is slightly above where we were this time last year, and that's a return of around 4%. So, and that's our long-term investment. So, the issue those investments are subject to valuation movements, and you can see that at the end of February, the overall value of those funds was 21.3 million, which is actually an unrealised gain. So it's a paper gain of 2.3 million, and that's something that does go up and down, which is why we hold those investments over the long term. So you've got the more detail in Appendix A, and Appendix B gives you more of the Treasury. So at the end of February, we had £51.6 million, which is actually around £10 million lower than we had this time last year, and that is the sort of direction of travel we were anticipating. We have had elevated cash flow, and a lot of that is because of a lot of the passporting of support and grant schemes through councils by government for COVID, and then more recently energy. That has actually increased our cash flows, but as expected, we will start to see those cash balances reduce. So happy to take any questions on that, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Do members have any questions for Phil? Councillor Mann.
Thanks for the report. Very, very clear, and no great surprises to frighten the horses, which is always a really good start. Two minor points, very minor points. On the sort of revised capital profile spend for this year, I know you got in 1.5 million for sort of Manor Street. What are we still doing there? I thought we'd wrap that up as a sort of a capital project some while ago. So we're still adding to it.
No, so that was in the programme, and that spend really was incurred earlier in the year. So that, although the scheme had been finished, you appreciate there's a sort of final account process with the contractor. So we'll have had retention sums that would have held back, and we've had to then square that final account in this year. Yeah.
Oh, I'm with you. And the second thing, you noticed capital receipts, some sort of land sales, BDC land sales. Are they significant? Any particular areas of note that we've sold off?
I suppose the most notable ones are the ones up at Horizon. So the new, what they call the EOS land, that's a significant chunk of the receipts generated. Where we're expecting receipts on council land are on, if you recall, we were looking to dispose of around half a dozen sites that we'd identified for potential residential. Those have not, although we've had offers on those that have been accepted. They're all subject to planning, so we're still those are the ones that are still sort of we're waiting for those to complete, and so some of that is subject to the prospective buyers getting the planning that they're expecting. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other members have any questions for Phil? Okay, thank you. Just before we move on, Phil, so how do our council tax collections and business rates collections compare with other local councils?
Yes, so well, very favourably in actual fact. I think with council tax, we've been one of the high performers across Essex, and we've just received some recent information on the business rates. So whilst we were sort of shy of last year at the end of February, that did turn around at the end of March. So that we actually collected more than we did last year, and actually it looks like we could be probably one of the higher performers in Essex on that income.
No, that's really good news. Thank you. So, as there are no remaining questions, we are asked to note the reports of the key financial indicators as of the 28th of February. So, can I take it that this report has been noted, and please raise your hands. Thank you, members. The report has been noted. So, I now move to agenda item 6, which is our internal audit update, including progress against the internal audit plan from 2022-23. This is set out on pages 11 to 21 of tonight's agenda. And can I please invite Angie Mitchell to set out her report?
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. So this report gives an update on the progress of the internal audit work in relation to the 22-23 plan, also an update on any RIPA applications, and references the external quality assessment, which is the subject of the next report to this committee. So paragraph 3.1 on page 12 lists the audits which have completed since the last progress report was prepared for this committee, and the detail of those audits is in Appendix 2. So there have been four reports completed, and also the follow-up of the Manor Street review. So members may recall that the director gave a presentation to this committee some time ago, giving details on the implementation of recommendations relating to that review. So this follow-up review is an independent assessment to confirm the status of that, the implementation of those recommendations. Paragraph 3.1.3 identifies the proportion of work completed that was affected by other factors. So that includes the other draws on my time, the changes in the staffing in the team, the work involved in the external quality assessment, and other items. Paragraph 3.2 confirms that there were no RIPA or IPA applications in 22-23 or to the date of producing this report. Paragraph 3.3 identifies the improvements that have been made both in respect of the previous external quality assessment, and that relates to the preparation of a comprehensive internal audit manual, and also the improvements that have been implemented in relation to the 22-23 external quality assessment, and those items are detailed in 3.3.3. Chair, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Angie. Members, does anybody have any questions? Councillor Mann?
Thank you, Chair. I usually ask this. 3.1.3, proportion of planned work completed was affected by the following factors. Other calls on your time. That seems to indicate that you would have done more other stuff had there not been these calls on your time. So asking, are you sufficiently resourced? Do you feel that there are enough hours available to do the work that you deem is necessary, and what can be done about the situation if that is not the case?
Thank you, Councillor Mann. So there is a balance to be had. You'll note again, referencing the external quality assessment, that we are conforming with the standards. Yeah. So that's positive. Obviously, I'm sure we would all like to be able to achieve more with our time, but we have to prioritise the workload that we have. That said, and again, we'll come on to this in the next report, there were recommendations made in the external quality assessment report, which could be challenging in the current environment, and we'll be talking to the director and head of finance about that.
Okay, and the second one, if I may, significant assurance on sort of most of the audit outcomes. The one that received limited assurance was asset management and sort of service charges. and noted that sort of rent reviews are not completed in a timely manner, and there's no current asset management strategy. Says management response is pending. Is there any news on what action might be taken about this?
So at this point, responses are pending, but we will obviously bring an update to this committee at the next meeting in July.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Do any other members wish to ask a question? Okay, thank you. So, members, we are asked to do two things on this report. So, firstly, to note the progress and performance against the 2022-23 internal audit plan, but also note the progress in respect of addressing actions identified in the external quality assessment of the internal audit function. So, I aim to take those at the same time, unless anybody opposes. So, can I take it that this report has been noted? And please indicate by show of hands. Thank you. So this report has been noted. I will now proceed to agenda item 7, which is the external quality assessment of conformance of the internal audit service to the public sector internal audit standards. And this report is set out on pages 22 to 37 of the agenda. And I will invite Phil Myers to set out this report.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So this is really a good news story, really, because it's an external independent assessment of our internal audit function. So it's something that we're required to carry out every 5 years. So the last one was in 2018, and so we were due one. We appointed a company called Tilia Solutions to carry this out, and I'm aware that so the chair and some of the members of this committee were involved in that process. So I think what the assessment has revealed, I mean, it's quite an extensive report there. It's an extensive review that's undertaken. And the overall assessment is that the internal audit function conforms. Now, doesn't sound particularly exciting, but I suppose that's audit language for you. And it's the highest rating you could achieve, and it compares with the rating that we had previously, which was a partially conforms. And I think it's just incumbent of me just to highlight and recognise that a lot of that improvement is down to the sort of dedication and work of Angie as the audit and insurance fraud manager, working with her wider team. And it's quite also pleasing to note that whilst as well as no areas of non-compliance, it was actually acknowledged, how well the team was regarded in the council. So I think that's positive. It just shows that the organisation values the benefit of a very professional and effective internal audit function. But as with everything, we always look for continuous improvement. So the assessment does come up with an action plan, as been alluded to, and there are some recommendations in there, and there are some suggestions in there. And so the report includes that suggested proposed action plan and the response of management to that, and some suggested dates by which we will be working towards that. And as has been alluded, some of those action points will be quite relatively straightforward to implement, but some of them will probably need us to take a look at some of the resource issues that may involve. And as Angie mentioned on the previous item, that's something that will be taking forward. So I think, yeah, as a general, a good news story, and through you, Chair, I'm sure if members have got any questions on the report or the action plan, then either Angie or I will be happy to take those.
Absolutely. No, thank you, Phil. And just before I hand over to members, I'd just like to echo that congratulations and much appreciation to Angie. I think to go from partially conforms to conforms to highest recommendation. And I think despite obviously there being an action plan, that's going to be understandable. I think many would expect there still to be recommendations and suggestions. It's important that we're able to get the capacity, I suppose, within the team to be able to move forward with those, to continue to keep now the standards at the highest it can be. It's maintaining that. But no, thank you ever so much. But do any other members wish to make any comments or ask any questions? Councillor Mann.
Thank you again, Chairman. Yeah, that's good. That's progress since 18, isn't it? It's good progress. And as you say, it is the highest score you can get. It doesn't, look much, but it is the ultimate. It's you can't do better than that. I noticed that there are 13 recommendations, and you hope to deal with them all within sort of 12 months. The sort of timeline, I think, is between March now and sort of March next year. Is that realistic? You're going to manage all that and the suggestions as well in that time, given maybe a resource constraint?
So we have discussed the action plan with both the head of finance and management team. So we will do our utmost. We always seek to continuously improve. One thing I would say though is that there are new proposed global internal audit standards, and so we should be mindful. So since the response, if you like, to the action plan was completed, we've got some draft information on the proposed new standards which are currently up for consultation, and we do expect that they will bring additional requirements to us. So there may be some things that depend on the timing of those new standards that perhaps we consider holding back to make sure we address everything at the same time. But yes, we're mindful of the recommendations, and we will keep reporting to you on our progress in respect of achieving them.
And the second one, if I may, this is a very, very minor point, but one of the suggestions is that you consider the value of carrying out formal as well as informal job appraisals. Now, I'm certain that in the deep past, perhaps I've been involved in formal sort of job appraisals, usually more quite senior staff, but do they no longer exist? Are all appraisals at the moment informal?
So a lot of my contact with staff has recently been informal due to the other pressures on time. However, the council is reviewing the whole system of appraisals and will look to introduce new methodology for all staff. So again, we'll be mindful of the new requirements there.
Thank you. Councillor Euston.
You'll be pleased to know no questions. Just to add my congratulations to moving from yellow to green, which is a major achievement, I think, and well done to you and your team. Thank you.
Thank you. As there are no further questions, we are asked to. So there's two points that we need to be mindful of here. So first of all, we're asked to note the outcome of the external quality assessment of the conformance to the public sector internal audit standards, which is attached to this report as Appendix A. And we're also asked to agree the action plan, which is included and we've just discussed. So I will take them in turn, as one is to be noted and one is to be agreed. So can I take it that the outcome has been noted? Please raise your hands. Thank you, members. And can I also take it that the action plan has been agreed? Please raise your hands. Thank you, members. So I will now move to agenda item 8, which I believe was one of the first recommendations from the action plan we've just agreed, so which is pretty positive news. Members, this report is set out on pages 38 to 53 of the agenda, and please again can I invite this time Angie Mitchell to set out her report.
Thank you, Chair. So the Internal Audit Charter is presented to this committee annually, and the changes made to the Charter since the last review by this committee really reflect, as Councillor Wrench said, the recommendations made in the external quality assessment relating to the Charter. So paragraph 3.4 specifies the changes and the paragraphs in which those changes have been made. So they are around the additional detail relating to the Code of Ethics, the updates to the non-audit operational functions performed by the team, and additional detail around the core principles for the professional practice of internal auditing. So those items tick off a few elements of the action plan for the external quality assessment, and one or two other minor typographical amendments. Chair, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Members, any questions? No. Okay. No, I think it was very clear and well set out, so thank you, Angie. So as there are no questions, we are asked to approve the updated internal audit charter. So please can I have a proposer to move the recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Euston. And can I please have a seconder? Councillor Mann. So thank you. So the recommendations have been moved and seconded. I will now put this to the vote. So all those in favour, please show by raising your hand. Thank you. That is unanimous and the recommendations are approved. So we will now proceed to agenda item 7, which is the annual audit letter for 2019-20. But instead of having a paper report tonight, can I please invite Steve Bladen, who is here on behalf of BDO, who's going to give us a verbal update this evening.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. So I'll give you a brief update on both of the audits that we've currently got in progress, which is the 2019-20 audit and 2020-21 audit. So I'll start with 2019-20. As I say, that audit is still in progress. There was one area that has been holding that audit up for some significant time, which is around the accounting treatment of infrastructure assets. This was subject to a national issue around the way that those assets are accounted for in local authorities. And I won't go into too much detail around that because I appreciate this has been discussed previously. There was a solution to that issue that was consulted on throughout 2022 and was finally put in place towards the end of 2022. And some guidance was released by SIPFA, the public sector accounting body, in January of this year around how local authorities should account for those assets. And on the back of that, auditors then started to identify the work that they needed to do over those infrastructure assets. I think it's fair to say, and I think we gave an undertaking to this committee that we would aim to sign off the 2019-20 audit by the end of January 2023. Unfortunately, it wasn't possible for us to do that. It did take us longer than we expected to identify what work in response to the SIPFA bulletin that we needed to do around infrastructure assets. However, we have now done that, and we have made some further requests to the Council for some information around those infrastructure assets. So we have been given everything that we need by the Council to enable us to do that work, and we are progressing that work. However, unfortunately, I do still think it will take us some time to get that work completed, and I think it is likely to be around the end of June before we're able to conclude our 19-20 or 2019-20 audit. Just moving on to 2021, which is the following year. So we have despite not signing off on 2019-20, we have done a significant amount of work around 2021. So that audit is well progressed. It will still take a little bit of time to conclude that audit once we have completed 2019-20. Apologies for the numerous year references, but we do need to get that 19-20 audit finished first before we can then take forward and conclude that 2021 audit. And I'd expect that to be later this year, once that 19-20 audit is complete. What we will be doing, and apologies that we don't have it to bring to you for this meeting, because I appreciate we've got a number of audits that we will need to complete. So not just the two that I've mentioned, but 21-22 and 22-23. So what we are working to do is to kind of set out a detailed plan as to when those audits will take place, that we can first discuss with officers and then share with members in a report that we can then discuss with you. But as I say, we're working to get that report to bring it to you, but we weren't able to have that in place for this evening. I'm happy to take any questions on what I've said.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Just before I hand over to any member, I think it's fair to say, and to be honest, that it's very disappointing to be in this position. We were given very strong assurance from some of your colleagues, so I appreciate not yourself personally, in our last meeting, which was around mid-January. Given that we were told that that work would be completed in 2 weeks, we're now a number of months down the line, and you've given an explanation quite clearly of why that is. But now that work's been carried out, where we were then promised 2 weeks for it to be completed, we're now still looking for another number of months until we get that signed off, which doesn't seem to make much logical sense, given that initially it was able to be completed in a few weeks' time. We've now done a lot of work to get that provided, and now we're not able to still get that signed off in the same time frame as was originally promised. And then just to some clarification on 2021 before I hand over to colleagues. You've said it will take a little bit more time, and you referred to it will be later this year. Do you mean late this year? Because clearly it is going to be later this year, but is that going to be, because originally we were promised that to be completed by February, which would, to me, in the same timescales as before, would mean July. But that's mid this year, not late this year. So could you provide some more assurances on, are we absolutely going to get that completed, first of all, 19-20 by June, and why can not be completed sooner than that? And also, when are we going to be likely to conclude on 2021, and is that going to be July, or is that likely to be late this year? I do welcome the idea of the detailed plan and the roadmap, and I think that would give a lot more confidence to the council, but I think it's not only disappointing from an officer position, and it puts a lot of stress and workload on the team in the council, but it's also very disappointing at a member's level to see where we are with this. So thank you.
Should I take those questions first?
Yeah.
Yeah. So in terms of the 1920 and the infrastructure asset issue, I think there's probably two points that are contributing to that. So it has taken us, in terms of it has taken us longer to work out the work that we would need to do to be able to give that opinion. So our interpretation of the SIPFA code update, it's just taken us longer to interpret that, put in place a programme of work than we expected. And I think it will take a little bit longer in terms of us doing the actual work than we anticipated it would do. So that's one point. And I think it is fair to say that the people that will be doing that work will be balancing that work alongside other work that they have to do, which in the NHS sector. So we always do and always have done work around the NHS in the May and June period. And so the work that we need to do on infrastructure assets will be balanced against that work that we're doing in the NHS sector. hence why it will take us a bit longer, or why I think it will take us longer to get to that and complete it. In terms of 2021, so there is a slightly different issue there. So the director who was originally the key audit partner for Braintree is now on a career break, and so another key audit partner, most likely will be myself, will need to pick up that audit. Having not previously been involved in the audit of 2021, it will need me to do and undertake a review of the work that has been completed, and I do not think I will get to be able to do that in July. I think it will be later this year, probably August, September time, before I'm able to get to a position to sign that audit off.
Okay. No, thank you for that update. Councillor Eusden.
Thank you, Chair. You actually asked my question, so that saved me a lot of trying to explain what I was going to need. But the responses that you've given would suggest to me that you don't have enough resources to do the work that you've got to do. Could you not put more resource into it to get it done? Because this, we've been waiting for this pretty much since I was elected, and my term finishes next week. It would have been nice to have at least seen one of them completed.
So, accept the points that you've made, Councillor. In terms of resourcing, it is auditors in the public sector are very hard to come by at the moment. It's recognised throughout the public sector audit market that there is a shortage of auditors with the correct skills and the necessary experience to be able to sign those audits off. Appreciate that there's a number of firms working within the local government sector, and all of them have backlogs to a varying degree, but most of those backlogs are significant. We have, if speaking for BDO, we have been able to recruit significantly over the last few weeks, but it will take a bit more time for those resources. When you appoint someone, it always takes a matter of weeks to get them actually in place and fully integrated into the team before they can start taking those audits forward. But I think we are seeing a greater level of resource coming into the team, and that will help us produce that roadmap that will set out when we will be able to get to those audits in the remainder of this year and the early parts of next year. But I don't dispute that there has been a shortage of resource in the team that has led to some of those backlogs, and it's not been easy to recruit to those vacant positions.
Thank you. Members, are there any more questions? Okay. I think it's important, if you can take that back to the team, the frustration and the disappointment to be where we are today and not see those reports signed off. But we do hope that maybe next time the committee meets, there will be a report that we will be able to sign off and to be able to look forward to 2021 as well. But no, I do appreciate you coming tonight and giving us that update. So thank you very much. Thank you. So members, please can we note that we've received Steve Bladen's verbal updates, and can you please indicate this by a show of hands? Thank you, members. So this verbal report has been noted, and I will now proceed to agenda item 10, which is the outcome of the Housing Benefit Subsidy 2020-21, the certification work undertaken by the Council's external auditors, and this is set out on pages 54 to 76 of the agenda. And please can I invite Phil, the Head of Finance, to set out these reports.
Yep. So this report, this is sort of the final stage of the subsidy process for the 2021 year. So we have to have, this is a piece of extra work that we've asked BDO to do for us. It's a requirement of DWP that as we claim significant housing benefit subsidy, that is actually independently sort of reviewed and certified. Apologies that the actual report that's attached, it's quite a technical report, and I think that's because it is prescribed very closely by DWP as to what they're exacting. They've got exacting requirements, and we know that BDO have to follow those, and they can't really deviate. And also, in terms of picking up errors, you can. I mean, on something where we're dealing with significant sums, significant number of volumes of transactions in what is a very quite complex benefit scheme anyway, you're inevitably going to find that there are errors. So this report sort of identifies and reports on the work that BDO have undertaken. You'll see they did, through their sort of testing, they did find some errors. The errors actually themselves are very small in terms of amounts and percentage, but as with everything when you're sampling, you do have to sort of then extrapolate that across the wider population. So we end up with an extrapolated error of just over £39,000. But I think the good thing is that even with that error and the errors that as an authority we identify ourselves anyway, we are still below the thresholds that DWP set in terms of levels of tolerance of errors in this area. So whilst we've got errors, and we will learn from those and take those forwards in terms of our processes, we don't actually lose any subsidy as a result of those because we are within the limits that the DWP set. So I think, and we pay extra fees, and that's set out for this piece of work. But again, in the context of we're claiming, around £27 million, the actual assurance work is actually a very small cost to get that independent assurance that we require. So I'm sure. Through you, Chair, I'm sure if members have got any questions on this, then again, either myself or I'm sure Steve will be able to help. And if members want any further elaboration on the work that BDO have done specifically. So.
Thank you, Phil. Members, are there any questions? Councillor Mann.
Well, that's reassuring because the actual report defeated me. I must say, I gave up trying to follow it because it was so technical. But as you say, it was sort of reassuring in that the sort of combined and offsetted errors were only sort of 39,000 out of global sum of 27 million. That's not bad. I mean, and I would think with a system like this, I mean, errors are inevitable. You simply couldn't avoid them. They're not, deliberate. They're just errors because of the complexity of the sort of the models that you're working with. And as you say, the important thing is that there weren't sufficient errors to trigger the threshold. So in fact, the subsidies not also that's very good. So all in all, pretty satisfactory, I'd say.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Councillor Eusden.
Just a couple of questions for clarification. Like Councillor Mann, I have to admit this may as well have been written in Chinese because, and I should hasten to add at this point, I don't speak Chinese. Nor do I speak this. But the two things that I noticed is on page 69, it says, this is the fourth year that this error has been identified in the HBAP report. And on page 71, it says this is the fifth year. Is that unusual, significant? Should we be taking action to make sure that we don't get to year 5 and year 6? Or is that just a normal function of the complicated area that we're working in?
Just bear with me 1 second, Councillor. So having what those both those errors, or certainly at least one of them, does relate to earned income calculations. So that's where the claimant will have income from employment and alongside their benefit entitlement, and that what we find when we undertake these audits or these reviews is that where you are likely to get errors is where there is earned income involved, because it quite often depends on a number of months' pay slips where there is an averaging calculation, and there's quite often deductions which are allowable and not allowable, and it just adds to the complexity of them. And where you get errors, it does tend to be where there is earned income. So it doesn't surprise me that those errors have been there for 4 or 5 years. And I think I would say that in any housing benefit subsidy audit that we do, not just this council, all of the councils, where you get errors is where there is earned income. So it doesn't surprise me that those errors have been there for 4 or 5 years, and I suspect they will be there in subsequent years as well. It's just the nature of the calculations, which are complex, and the regulations, which are equally complex.
So we don't need to worry about that then?
I think the errors themselves are very small. Appreciate that they are then extrapolated to a bigger number, but the size of them doesn't give me cause for concern, no. And I think the fact that overall that error level is below the threshold set by DWP, I don't think it should overly concern members. I mean, clearly you would like to be in a position where there were no errors, but realistically, I think that's unlikely given the complexity of the scheme.
Thank you. Members, are there any more questions? Okay. So we are asked to note the outcome of this report. So can I please take it that this report has been noted, and please indicate by show of hands. Thank you, members. So, apologies, we now are on our final agenda item of this evening. Steve, you're more than welcome to leave us at this point, or if you'd like to stay for the remainder of the meeting, you're more than welcome to do so.
I'll stay.
Okay, that's absolutely fine. So we are now looking at our strategic risk register, which is set out on pages 77 to 106 of tonight's agenda. So please can I invite Phil Myers, the Head of Finance, to set out this report.
Yep, so members, be aware, we try and review the strategic risk register at least twice a year. So one of those reviews involves members, so we have a very well attended and quite, I think, a very engaging session with members, usually in May, as part of the development evening on strategic risk. So we had that review, and that was reported through to Cabinet in July, and then subsequent to this meeting. So what you've got here is the second review now in that cycle, and this is more sort of management-led, this one. So senior managers and management board have again looked at the strategic risks and looked at those, and as you can see from the report, there's been no change in the sort of risk assessments in terms of their ratings, in terms of likelihood or impact. So they've remained the same. There has been updates to the narrative and where risks are above the sort of tolerance level, they sort of management action plans, so they've been updated by the risk owners. So it's really just for members to receive this and consider this, and if there are any views, then so those can be fed into the next review, which obviously we'll start to be sort of planning at the time being. We do just touch on in the report about the risk management policy, so it's something that we know is in due for a refresh and update, and our internal audit colleagues have looked at that area as well. So we will be sort of bringing forward some changes around the sort of framework in which we deal with these risks, and that will sort of set the structure for the risk register going forward. But other than that, happy to take any questions if I can, or at least take them on board for the next review.
Thank you, Phil. Members, Councillor Mann.
Well, I mean, this is a very familiar sort of document. There were, as you say, some word changes in the narrative, but none of the weightings have changed at all, which I think is a good thing, because I think it indicates, you know, the level of thought that goes into the process year on year. I mean, I think the council's absolutely clear, you know, what the strategic risks are, and how they approach them. So, you know, I think again it is you know, a very comprehensive view, and reassuring.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Do any Councillor Euston?
More probably an observation than anything. The area on planning makes reference to the 4 nationally significant infrastructure projects and the arrival of perhaps 2 more. One of those, I think, is a solar farm that is being proposed to become a national significant infrastructure whatever it is anyway, one of those. And I just wondered what weight is being added to the government's declared intention to, shall we say, bypass the planning process locally on other areas that it's going to reclassify as national infrastructure. And are we ready to reflect that in our strategic risk register if it happens?
Yeah, well, I profess I'm not a planning expert, but I'm certain, yeah, the changes around the planning system will very much feature in the next review of this. So I'm sure that sort of developing piece will be picked up by the risk owners when we next review this.
Well, it itself becomes a strategic risk.
Okay, thank you, members. Do any other members wish to speak on this item? So, as there are no further questions, we are asked to note and endorse the strategic risk register and the action plans for managing the high-rated risks. So can I take it that this report has been noted and endorsed? And please indicate by a show of hands. Thank you, members. So that has been noted and endorsed, and I will now proceed to agenda item 12, which is urgent business. Members, as we have no urgent business, this item concludes our business for this evening. Just before we do leave this evening, I would just like to thank both Angie and Phil for their efforts, as this is the last meeting for this whole term of office. And so with that in mind as well, thank you to Councillor Mann, knowing that he's ever attendance and also wise words and critical questions have always been appreciated on this committee, and also our Vice Chair, Councillor Euston, being your last meeting here at Braintree District Council. But for all of us, we don't know what the future will hold, so at our next meeting, we may be here, we may be not, but I would also like to pass thanks to our governance members as well, so officers, so Alison Webb and also Emma Wisby, who have guided and advised throughout this whole process. So thank you ever so much. So I will now close this meeting of the Governance and Audit Scrutiny Committee at 8:15. So thank you, members, for your attendance this evening, and to those watching via the YouTube broadcast, good night.